Hi, I'm Roberta Winters, and I'm here to give you an overview of our program planning for January 2021. Program planning is an important part of the League of Women Voters. It allows us to educate and give you information based on our studies, our consensus, and our existing positions. It also is a tool for advocacy in that it allows us to look at our positions and our principles. And our advocacy is at several different levels. First of all, there's our National League of Women Voters United States, and they have a campaign for helping to make democracy work, which is primarily focused on voting. We also have our state issues at the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, and they're focusing basically on reforms in our government and gerrymandering at this point in time. The League of Women Voters in Delaware County also looks at countywide issues, things like our health department, how our voting is conducted in our county. And finally, there's our local league, and we look at local issues in our township, such as land use, our schools, and other services. If you look at our positions at any of our websites, be they national, state, county, or local, you will see that they're all broadly worded. And that's so that we can be flexible. For example, if you're concerned about minimum wage, you won't find it in a position per se, but you will find it under our position called meeting basic needs. If you're looking at criminal justice, we're looking at the equality of opportunities and individual liberties, which is an overriding umbrella that covers things such as criminal justice. And if you're looking at the national level for education, you won't see anything there except what the federal role is in education, because the specific role for education positions falls under the state, which has jurisdictions over our local public schools. Now, we at the local level can use either a local, state, or national position to advocate. The state can only use what we have in Pennsylvania or at the national level. And the national positions can only be used at the national level. So we at the local level have a lot more flexibility than other parts of the league. Now, what do we do in program planning? Well, first of all, we look at issues. We look at our positions, and then we see if there's something that addresses them. When you look at positions, it's kind of tricky because there are in brief positions and in depth positions. So sometimes when you read something, you don't realize all the aspects it encompasses. So it's important when you're looking at something like criminal justice reform that you look at the whole position and the items in brief, because there are things on juvenile justice per se and things on other aspects of our justice system. So if you've looked at an issue, you can find a position, then you have to decide if you're going to educate and advocate for that position. So if it's an issue such as national popular vote, we probably need to educate the public before we begin to advocate, because they may not know what it specifically entails. Further, when we look at all of these positions and we begin to educate and advocate, we always need to keep in mind that all of this must be addressed through the lens of our diversity, equity, and inclusion principles. So where do we stand? This year in Pennsylvania, we are looking at Pennsylvania issues and local issues and our positions relative to those two things. So first of all, where do we stand? Well, this is the positions that have been developed through a 5-step process. So we've observed a problem. Say it's the lack of a health department in Delaware County. We then study the problem. We discuss all the sides of the issues. We look at the pros and the cons. We then try to reach member consensus by meeting, discussing, looking at all sides of the issue, and coming up with a solution or a position that we all can agree to. Finally, we then take action. We have meetings that educate people. We could then write about it. We can phone our legislators. We can have meetings. We can do whatever we want to take and bring that position to the fore is a way to advocate for change. And finally, if nothing happens in spite of our advocacy efforts, and it's a decision that can be litigated, we can take that to the court system if we feel that our citizens' rights are being severely harmed. And in the fact, we have recently won a position on Marsy's Law in the state of Pennsylvania based on litigation. So, our positions, we have things in brief and we have things in detail. So if you're looking at things like our judiciary system, you can see we have a position which says we support an efficient unified court system and a responsible ethical judiciary that is free from political influence. Right now in our Commonwealth, we're looking at an alternative way to elect judges. Well, since 1949, we've been looking for merit selection of judges, and it actually, in 1969 was narrowly defeated, but we still keep pushing that because we feel that's better than any kind of partisan election. In 1989, we supported state funding of all courts so that we would not have our lawyers actually being involved as judges in determining their own kind of oversight. So we wanted to make sure we included constables, we could educate court administrators, and there was oversight in the minor courts. So we did get state funding so that those things could be happening. And we also, in 1993, supported the restructuring of the judicial discipline system. So that's what I was speaking about before, in error, so that judges would not judge their own peers. So that was a constitutional amendment. And again, in 2008, we did file civil rights lawsuits. And actually, this was litigation because there was a justice named Cappy who was trying to tie pay wages for the judges to a decision that would make gambling constitutionally acceptable. So there's all kinds of things with the judiciary that fits under that broad, flexible position. So what do we do when we have a program meeting? We have a discussion. We look at all of our existing positions. They say, do we meet their needs? Do we need to keep them as is? Do they need to be updated? Or maybe even just eliminated? Do we need a new position? Do we need new studies? What kind of feedback do we need to give to the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania? So if we see something happening, we can take and provide information at the local level. And if we feel it's a statewide issue, such as fracking was several years ago, we can then look at doing a study on natural gas extraction from Marcellus Shale. We can then follow it up with a pipeline study that's impacting many of our counties. So that's how we get a position. So then we can advocate locally and at the state level to provide what we believe the league should be doing. And in fact, this is the kind of report the leadership of your local leagues will be filling out. They'll look at all the different state programs, decide whether they need to be retained, dropped, or updated, and then they'll also ask how they've been being used. For example, I'm sure most of you have been looking at apportion and redistricting or election laws. Those are things you've probably been looking at your local league level right now. So let's look at the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania positions right now. They fall under three basic categories, and you can find them online at Where We Stand. We have some on representative government, natural resources, and social policy. And if you look at representative government, you'll see we have things on apportionment and redistricting, election law, government authorities, initiative and referendum, judiciary, legislative, and municipal governments. These are all things close to league leaders' hearts, and I'm sure yours as well. So if you look at these positions, you will find that, for example, on apportionment and redistricting, we support apportionment and redistricting based substantially on population of all voting districts, with additional consideration given to compact and contiguous territories and respect given to municipal boundaries. So that's the first one. So then we'll say, do we need to keep it? Do we need to update it? Do we need to eliminate it? So those are the ways in which we will have that meeting. So you can find all of our positions online and follow each one through. So these are some of the ones with representative government. And you can see election law supports effective election laws and uniform procedures. Well, that doesn't say much, but we've certainly made a lot of progress recently with election laws based on that broad, flexible position. Natural resource looks at land use, water resources, the natural gas extraction from Marcellus Shale I recently mentioned, pipelines, and property rights, because there were some things they were going to do to allow pooling where people didn't have a say in whether or not they were going to use their land for natural gas extraction. Now, again, you can see the positions and how they are all related to our sense that natural resources are an interrelated part of a self-supporting ecosystem. Again, you can read each of these brief positions and know that they are followed up with greater in-depth explanations as you look at it. So, for example, League of Women Voters supports measures to reduce pollution in order to protect surface water, groundwater, and drinking water. That covers a lot. So we're not just looking at clean stream laws, but we're looking at wetlands and all kinds of issues, from groundwater to surface water to storm water, all the rest of it. So our natural resource policies are very helpful to us as we look at climate change and other issues impacting our natural world. Social policy is near and dear to many of our hearts. This includes child health and welfare. This is a place where there's some juvenile justice issues put in. Collective bargaining in public systems like school districts, education, family issues and laws, fiscal policy, gambling, and transportation. A broad range of issues under this big umbrella of social policy. You can again find these online. This happens to be a graphic, as were all of these, from the League of Women Voters of Pittsburgh, and it makes it a little more interesting than just a black and white text. But you can see what these policies are, including things like reproductive rights. So there they are, and you can find them right online. Then, once you've decided what's happening at the state level, you then look at program planning at what your local positions are. And I'm looking specifically at Radnor, where I am a leader. So we're looking at land use, education, local fiscal policy, and environmental quality. I've taken and extracted each of these positions and printed them out so that someone can read them and follow along. We also have these positions written in the back of our directory, and they're also at our website. So most of these positions you can find locally on your website, at the state website, and on the national website. So just Google LWV Radnor positions, LWVPA positions, LWVUS positions, and you'll come close to finding all these things with a little effort. Now, again, we have positions on recreation, local government, senior citizens, and redistricting as well. So those are here, as you can see, printed out. And we've taken the national and state positions about mapping and fair districts to go into local ward lines, and provided the same kind of notion for transparency and also a nonpartisan commission, so that we could hopefully take some of the politics out of the local level of our wards. Now, at this point in time, I believe the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania Board is looking at priorities, and our input will help them decide where they're going to go at the state level. Of course, stopping gerrymandering has been a concern of the League for decades. We're looking at the election reforms and hoping to maintain things like mail-in balloting. We're looking at reforming the rules, which will allow our legislature to become more productive. The judicial election issue, as you know, right now there's some consideration of having a constitutional amendment so that judges are elected regionally rather than across the state, which is in fact jeopardizing justice. We are looking at environmental issues across the Commonwealth, from natural gas operations, from pipelines to crackers, to all kinds of related issues. And also we have a continuing look at public education and gun safety. So we are looking at priorities and helping to make democracy work at the national level as well, the election reform issues, the voter protection, and the money in politics. All of these are priorities that we work on from the bottom up and from the top down. So People-powered fair maps is a very important issue at all levels of the league because we're looking at keeping those redistricting criteria that are fair and appropriate to protect our communities of color, to have transparency in this process, to make sure our constitutions at all states are protected. And we want to make sure that when we look at the data from our census, that we may in fact have to extend some of these timelines in order to do these things right. So this is a priority at the national level, which we will be looking at as well at the local level. Other things include climate change, the Equal Rights Amendment, which we're still funding for passage, the justice reform issues that you've heard about across the Commonwealth and across the country, national popular vote, and the reproductive choice item, which continues to be a source of contention throughout our country. So these are some of the United States priorities, which again, we at the local level can support and endorse. Some of you may say, well, what about climate change? That's a big issue right now. Well, at the national level, we do have a climate change position, and you can go there to see what it is. I took this graphic from the Pittsburgh League, and it really summarizes all the different things that we've looked at, and many of our natural resource positions at the national level also cover these. So I'd like to thank you for putting up with a PowerPoint presentation of our program planning for the League of Women Voters. I hope it's helpful and will make your program planning wherever it may be it on Zoom today or at a meeting in the future, that all this will help make sense to you, because we want to make sure you're educated about our positions and then can use them in a way that'll help advance our positions and make them become reality. So you know, as a league member also, the League of Women Voters speaks with one voice. So if you feel you need to advocate, you may not use a league position unilaterally. Your league positions are to be adopted and addressed at your local level with local leaders and local boards, state boards and national boards, authorizing that the league speaks with one voice. So make sure, just because it sounds good and you're a league member, you can't use that league position unilaterally, but it needs to be approved and come through your local, state, or national leadership. So I hope you have a great time. Enjoy learning more about the league and get involved. Civic participation is what's going to make a difference in helping to keep our democracy alive and working. Thank you again. Bye now.